And good morning. Cheers. And looks like audio is working. Let's just triple check. Yep. I think we're good. The production studio is functional today. So today I would like to try and share some potential warning signs for ERP customers. What could a customer who is implementing ERP, Business Central, something similar, what could they look for that might give them an indication that they're walking down the wrong path, things aren't going well, they are signing a contract with a partner who may not work out for them. So things like that. And now this is a little more challenging for me because I have worked in the consulting world for I don't even know how long, 19 years, something like that. No, I don't know, a long time. My entire career basically following college. So it was more difficult for me to come up with this list. I think I now have a lot of them, but they didn't come to me as easily as they did the last video, which was warning signs for partners. And so that one was fairly easy because I've lived through all of those things. I knew all of those things. But to switch it around and look for some of those things from the customer perspective and reorient from what a customer could look for or should look for, or how would they know that this problem is occurring, that was a little more challenging. It's a different set of concerns, 180-degree orientation. So I've tried. If you didn't see the last video for warning signs for ERP partners, it is on youtube.com/steveendo. It's also on my Twitter feed. If you just scroll back, let's see, it was September 30th. It is on Twitter as a live video feed there. And in case you don't like video and you prefer podcast, I am also converting the audio to a podcast at podcast.steveendo.com. And if I am not annoying you enough with all of these media feeds, my apologies. I have run out of options at this point. I'm not going to be on TikTok. Sorry. So that's where you can find this stuff and listen or watch that last episode. So what are we talking about today? Implementation warning signs for a customer, right? And just for sanity's sake, to have some scope and definition here, I'm thinking just for the purpose of this conversation to talk about implementation. So ERP implementation. Maybe a customer is implementing a new system. They're coming off of QuickBooks, a different ERP, on-prem to SaaS, whatever the case is. It's essentially some concerns that they might be able to look for when implementing a new ERP system. And I'm thinking there's kind of two general categories of risk. There's signs of potential implementation partner risk. So in our ecosystem, we typically work with, say, a customer works with a Microsoft partner, and that customer is essentially forming a relationship with that partner, and that will last a minimum of several months during the implementation. And if all goes well, that could be a multi-year relationship. So you kind of want to know who you're signing a contract with and who you're going to be working with and spending thousands and thousands of dollars with. So your implementation partner is kind of important to evaluate them. Signs of potential implementation project risk. Regardless of who your partner is, you could have the best partner in the world, but whether through something that the partner does or doesn't do, or something you internally do, don't do, or unable to do, whatever the case is, you could have project risk for your implementation. So you want to look out for that, right? So are you, the customer, actively looking for warning signs? If you are not, that in itself is a warning sign. If you are expecting that once you find this partner, go through the sales pitch, sign a contract, everything is smooth sailing from there, you are in trouble already. And so you need to have your antennas up. You need to be looking for these issues. You need to be expecting some things to be problematic. And it just happens in these complex projects. Do you, the customer, know what to look for? And I think this might be one of the biggest challenges for customers implementing ERP. I, as say a partner, a consultant, a developer, I've done this dozens and dozens of times over more than a decade, and it's just what I do. So I kind of see some of these things. I don't always catch them. If you watch my last video, you'll know that. But I try and say, that's just not going to work. And when we know that's a dead end as a consultant or a partner, we'll just say, sorry, that's not going to work. Can't do that. If the partner has integrity, they'll bring those forth. But as a customer, do you really know what to look for? How many ERP implementations have you done as an organization? Even if you have one or two employees that have done one or two prior implementations a few years ago, they're not necessarily going to be proficient in this process. So it is challenging for a customer to even know what to look for. So I'll try to offer some tips here. Okay, before you implement, I would just make you aware of what you may want to prepare for. For your implementation team, and I do recommend a team, are you prepared to identify issues before or during a project? If you think you're going to sign that contract and be hands off and the partner's just going to magically deliver something after 2, 3, 6 months, you're in trouble. You need to be able to actively participate, identify issues, and be responsible for that. Do you have the political capital raise concerns? This is an actual issue internally in an organization. If someone is being assigned the venerable role of having to manage a project, it's probably not their sole job at the company. If it's the IT person or the accounting manager, or controller, whatever, they have a day job, yet they've been asked to deal with this implementation. And if they start to raise concerns, and if the partner is the golf buddy of the CFO or someone on the board or whatever, they're not an expert ERP implementer, and this partner is. If they repeatedly have to raise concerns, that may burn their internal political capital, unfortunately, whether they're right or not. So do you have the political capital? Do you have the authority, the autonomy? Have you been granted the authority to raise concerns and deal with issues, right? So what can you do about it? Even if you find an issue, if someone says, just deal with it, I don't want to hear about it, it's just not going to go well, I don't think. Can you realistically pause, stop, or renegotiate, or whatever? Can you produce consequence? Can you enforce some requirement? If you can't, you're kind of in a little bit of a trouble, or you're behind the curve and you're going to have to get creative as to how you deal with it. And you will need some support from the management above you so that you can enforce some of these requests. Before you implement, before you sign anything, read the statement of work carefully. Sometimes it might be called a statement of work. Sometimes it's called an engagement letter. Sometimes it's called a contract. Whatever it's called, doesn't matter. Same thing. It is the agreement between you and the partner. Read it carefully. And there are things you will want to look for, but there are also things you'll want to identify are missing. And that is obviously much harder. How do you know this critical paragraph is not present in this engagement letter? You would have to just know to look for it. And if you don't find it, you know there's a problem. You need to have it addressed. Read the terms and conditions carefully. Sometimes this is embedded in the engagement letter statement of work. Sometimes it's an addendum. Usually is like legalese, it's an NDA, whatever that looks like. It's lawyer speak. May not be your favorite thing to read, but you have to read it. Those clauses come into effect when there is a dispute. And the more that dispute escalates, the more those terms and conditions matter. One sentence in that terms and conditions can cause you to accept all the liability and loss on a project, or try to, or can push all of that risk to the partner. So it really depends. One sentence, present, missing, the way it's written, really can affect your project. Okay, so the number one easiest thing you can do as a customer, just always do it, something you have full control over. Make sure you get source code for any customizations done for you. Very simple. Read the engagement letter. If it is not in there, demand a very clear, explicit paragraph or clause with regular delivery of full PTE source code in engagement letter. And whether that's a Business Central PTE, maybe it's an Azure function, maybe it's a Azure Logic app, maybe there's some code there, whatever. Anytime there is code, anytime there is a customization, anytime there is something that is developed for you as part of this implementation, demand regular delivery of the full source code and make that an explicit term in the engagement letter. Now, there's delivery of source code, and then there's the intellectual property rights or the license granted to you as a customer. Those are two different things. So you will also want to make sure that you have some intellectual property rights to all of those customizations. In the United States, those can be two very different things, so you need to make sure to cover both. And at a minimum, I would recommend what I believe is called a non-exclusive and unrestricted license, meaning you as a customer have your own access to that. It's non-exclusive in that the partner may have access to it, other customers may have access to it, whatever. And you want to have unrestricted license to use internally, to develop further. Maybe you want to go and sell this as a solution. You should be able to do that. And if a partner says, no, we do not provide source code, no, you cannot have the source code, no, we own the source code for any customizations we deliver to you, huge red flag, huge red flag. If any partner disagrees with me, I'm sorry. I advocate for my customers, and you're wrong. Absolutely every customer needs to demand full source code for any customization they paid for. Now, you should also, as part of that, discuss location of source code repository, because the partner should be using a source code repository. Will they maintain that repo, or will you maintain that repo? Will it be DevOps? Will it be GitHub? Whatever. Just make sure you understand where that's occurring. So discuss regular delivery of full code and any artifacts or compiled versions like app files or, Azure function executables, whatever those are. My recommendation, no source code, no project, no exceptions, period. And the reason for this is that you'll go along, you'll implement, everything will be rosy, you'll think everything is great. 3 years later, you decide to switch to a different partner for whatever reason. 6 months after you switch, you go to upgrade, your upgrade fails. You realize you have 7 customizations you don't have the source code for. They will not upgrade to the new version because some syntax change, some breaking change in Business Central, whatever the case. Maybe there was a connectivity change with an Azure function. Doesn't matter. You don't have the source code. Then you ask your partner. They said, you have 7 customizations. They should have found that out during the switchover process, but regardless, it's usually later in the process when this is identified. You then have to crawl back to the old partner who you switched off of. They're usually not pleased. And unless you have a clause in your contract and unless you've been asking for that source code, you're at their mercy. Sometimes they begrudgingly dig through their files and send you whatever code they can find. Sometimes the developer they used was a contractor who's no longer present. They can't help you. Sometimes they say, per the terms of our engagement letter, you owe us if you want to use this code. You either need to buy it from us or you need to pay an annual subscription in order to use it per the license terms. They are holding you hostage. It is like, it's not a good situation in either event. So do this upfront period before you sign anything unequivocally. It'll save you later down the road. Okay, with that rant. Responsibility. This is an ongoing theme that I will emphasize. You as the customer need to be responsible for the implementation project. If you think you're going to push all responsibility to the partner, whether you think that's a good idea or not, the outcome of your project, I don't believe, will be positive or good long term. Can you lead the project? Can you manage the project? Can you be involved in the project? If you can't do those things, you are increasing your own risk. You are pushing all of that responsibility on the partner. Maybe they can pull that off. Maybe they can't. Sometimes, regardless of what they do, unless you're actively involved and actively managing and taking responsibility for at a minimum 50% of the project, preferably more, it's just not going to go well. Because if people aren't responsible for something, it tends to get pushed off and it's someone else's problem. That just doesn't go well. So take responsibility for your implementation. And the challenge is most mid-market customers that I've worked with, they just do not have the knowledge, experience, or capacity to lead the project, let alone manage the project. They just assume it's going to be taken care of, like hiring the plumber to just fix something in your house, like fine, whatever, be done with it. Or the mechanic fixing your car. It's like, I don't understand that, so you just deal with it and fix it. Might be able to pull that off with those smaller jobs, but in ERP implementation, you should take responsibility, you should be involved, and you should participate in the management of it. Now, you may not be able to take full responsibility, and that's fine. You're hiring a partner usually to work with you to help. And so I would say you need to understand that's a shared responsibility. Customers should accept some responsibility for the implementation and share that responsibility with the partner. How much? I would say at least 50%. If you're not taking at least 50%, whatever that looks like, however you kind of guesstimate that, it's not good. You need to take a majority of the responsibility. And the reason I say this is because if you tell a partner that there was this failed implementation, the first question that they will say, or the first statement they'll make is, how much is the customer's fault? Or the customer is at least 50% responsible. And I don't disagree. Sometimes there's, different factors going on, but it is very common that a partner tries, but without customer participation, the project just can't be successful. Related to that, if you believe the partner is the expert and they should know what you need, how you need it, they should be able to read your mind. They should be able to know what you need and anticipate anything you might want or a problem that may occur, or that if you think something's obvious that you need, or why wasn't that included in your engagement letter? If you are saying any of these things, that is a problem on your side because you are not taking responsibility. Your partner can try to help you with some of these things, but they can't read your mind. They don't know everything about your business or even about Business Central. There are thousands of nooks and crannies in Business Central, and there are all sorts of weird oddities of every customer, and they just can't know that. They can't know that you want your invoices processed in this convoluted, circuitous manner. It wouldn't be obvious to them unless you share that and have that documented. So while the partner may be an expert in some areas, they will not be an expert in the intersection of your business and Business Central or CRM or, third-party integrations or whatever. You need to work together with the partner to make that happen. Okay, here's a little bit of an easier, clear-cut warning sign, what I might call the two-call proposal. And this can be a problem from either direction, the customer or the partner. On the customer side, if you, the customer, ask a partner to deliver a proposal after a few phone calls, that is a red flag on your part. That is a warning sign. Just going to tell you, you shouldn't be doing that because it's impossible. On the other hand, if you have a couple calls and the partner's like, great, let me get you that proposal tomorrow. And if the partner actually delivers a full proposal after a few phone calls, that is also a warning sign because it's not possible. Like maybe there's some little task, maybe, but for a full-blown ERP implementation, 120 plus hours, integrations, multiple modules, custom invoices, financials, and, data migration, multiple companies, there's a lot involved there. So what are the chances that all of the products, modules, configuration, licenses, data, transactions, integrations, exceptions, reports, training, and all of this can be known by a partner after just 2 phone calls? You shouldn't ask for it. The partner shouldn't offer it. This may be a controversial thing because I know it is done way too often, but it's just going to lead to bad news. So I have another point on how to potentially mitigate this in a compromise. But before we get there, a very common project management approach, methodology, whatever you call it, is referred to as the Waterfall Model. And I would offer that waterfall is always wrong, just by definition. And anyone who's delved into the agile project management world should be familiar with this criticism or point, that a waterfall model, by definition, cannot possibly be remotely accurate. And it is by definition just a wild guess. It is one guess dependent upon another guess all the way down the chain and all the way back up the chain. And I'll explain. So you see this diagram. We have project planning, then we have requirements come out of that. Then we have analysis come out of that, then design, then coding, then testing, then deployment. How can you plan for deployment if you haven't yet done any of those prior tasks? That's the problem. You're kind of guessing all the way down that stack in order to guess when deployment might occur and how much all of this might cost. So that is my understanding of the criticism of waterfall. And anytime you see a Gantt chart, that is typically a waterfall representation of tasks in a project, right? So I just grabbed this image off Google image search, and it's a pretty good example. So this is a waterfall model for software engineering. So at feature 1, we have research and discovery up at the top in green. So we're going to do research and discovery. Then when we're done with that, we're going to do a design phase. And then after that, we're going to do a development phase 1 and phase 2. Then we're going to do testing and deployment. Makes perfect logical sense, right? Well, what's the problem here? Well, you have requirements gathering in green up there at that first arrow. And then you have a high-level design. Well, you're assuming that requirements gathering is going to take X days, and then high-level design is going to take X days and X hours with X resources. And then you have a development phase 1 and phase 2, and then you have testing. How can you possibly say that testing is going to begin on October 19th if requirements gathering hasn't even been started on September 13th? So you see it's a myth, and it makes you feel good to see these Gantt charts and have this thing stacked out. It makes you look neat and organized, but this is just one entire massive guess. And you're like, okay, yeah, maybe that'll take a couple days. Sure. Let's just connect that dependency. So just be aware of that. And I've looked into Waterfall. I've looked into Agile. I don't have an answer, unfortunately. I'd love to do Agile. As a partner, as a software developer. But the problem with Agile is customers want timelines, they want budgets, they want project plans, they want scope up front before they commit. I don't know where that middle ground is, unfortunately. Related to waterfall weaknesses. Estimates are always wrong, always. If someone gives you an estimate before the project starts, just by definition, it is going to be wrong in one way or another. It'll be too many hours, it'll be too few hours, or it will be a mix of too few and too many hours on any given task. Every single estimate is just a guess if it is for the entire project. So, once again, for example, how can I give you, customer, an estimate for the entire project on a proposal if we have not yet defined scope, if we have not yet done requirements analysis, if we have not yet done a design? If someone delivers a project plan to you before the project starts and says, here's what we're going to do, here's how long it's going to take, here's how much it's going to cost, you should instantly just be aware, for better or worse, that it's just pure fiction. It's that person's best wild guess as to how this is going to play out and how long it's going to take and how much it's going to cost. Now, if you accept that, you understand that, that's one thing. If you truly believe that these are real costs, these are real dates, this is a real project plan that's going to go along that Gantt chart, you might want to think twice about that. Just understand that you're just getting in the car, you're going on a ride, and you'll just see what happens once you get on the road, right? So you can take a different approach though. So the one big challenge with all of this, the Gantt chart, proposal, everything up front, timeline, cost estimates, everything, is what I would call the Big Bang project. And this is a term used in project management, academic circles and training. So the Big Bang project is just, here we go, we're going to deliver this entire giant project at once. Nope, we're not going to have a scoping phase. That's part of the project. The design phase, part of the project. Prototype phase, yep, we'll do that in there. Implementation, testing, deployment, all of that is in the project, and they're somehow magically giving you a number for all of that work, even though you don't know the scope, design, prototypes, implementation. So I would humbly recommend that you be open to a paid scoping phase. Okay, rather than try and jam this on the 2 free sales phone calls where the salesperson will tell you yes for anything you ask for, consider a paid scoping phase where an actual practitioner, a consultant, a business analyst, a technical resource comes in, you actually pay them to scope and or design and or prototype so that you have these phases in preparation for your implementation. Otherwise, it's all just fantasy in a Gantt chart. Also, on the implementation itself, I strongly recommend considering phase 1 and phase 2 so that you do not need to have every single feature, every single request, meet every single requirement on January 1st. It may not be possible. Prioritize what you want, have a phase 1, have a likely phase 2. Maybe you'll be able to get some phase 2 items done in phase 1. Maybe you'll need to push some phase 1 items out to phase 2. Be prepared for that. I think it's more realistic than holding the partner's feet to the fire and say everything must be included January 1st, including these 25 things we didn't realize we needed, or these 10 things we forgot, or these 15 things that were misunderstood between the two of us. So I recommend it. Ad hoc project management. This is a kind of nebulous, but it came up in a failed implementation review that I did. And the criticism of the partner made by the customer, which I was kind of interested in, was that requirements were discussed via email. So the criticism was that the project manager or business analyst on the project was emailing a developer to say, hey, when you develop this, here's kind of what you're going to need to do, and here's how I want to do it. Here's a couple screenshots. Does this make sense? And the criticism is that is not how you should be managing your requirements. You should not be communicating them on the fly 2 months into a project and emailing the developer where he's like, wait, you want me to do what? These should be documented as part of the requirements analysis phase, the requirements analysis process. The project manager or business analyst should be able to say in our requirements doc, section 612, please refer to the design of this page and how we want these fields laid out. So that was the criticism. And I thought that was interesting because I know I do a lot of requirements discussion via email. A lot of stuff comes up ad hoc. Well, it takes a fair amount of discipline to stop, to pause and say, okay, something has changed. We didn't catch something. Something is out of scope, whatever the case is, and send this back to a requirements analysis process. Or if you're the customer seeing this type of ad hoc requirements discussion, that generally can point to a project management issue. And it may have started all the way back from day one when you agreed to that massive waterfall project where the requirements were baked into this mythical price that you're being offered. So without explicit requirements analysis, without explicit requirements documentation, you're likely going to run into an issue. So how do you accomplish this? Well, you'll need a clear project manager, someone who has discipline to actually manage the projects in detail. Project management system is very handy. Okay, what tasks do we have? Who's working on them? What are the expected delivery dates? Regular project meetings. What is the status of everything? Preferably weekly at a minimum. Requirements traceability matrix. This is kind of a fancy word that I learned of recently, and this is a formal document where it's not just a task list that gets slapped in an Excel spreadsheet or on a website. It's an actual document or part of a project management system that documents this requirement. Here's the explanation. Here's who requested it. Here's when they requested it. Here's the status of that requirement. Here are the test plans that are associated with that. And there's no hard, firm definition of what it contains, but has a fair number of fields to allow you to track that, trace its status, where it came from, why it was requested, and any changes to it. Like maybe you find, we no longer need this, so you need to track that. And the developer, if someone's doing a customization, should be able to refer to that, should be able to refer to a specifications document, right? So project plans, task lists, assignments, due dates, RTMs, all of that helps minimize or avoid ad hoc project management. One that I see all the time, and in fact, I think I've only seen it maybe 2 or 3 times outside of my own projects where I've done it. No budget versus actual. Like, this is so unbelievably rare, it's shocking. If I were a customer, I would say, hey, we are going to have weekly project updates. You are going to present the budget versus actual report. Whether that's in hours or dollar amount, doesn't really matter. Hours is usually like the metric of work. So budget versus actual by task in terms of hours. And you will be shocked at what you find. You will learn that those waterfall projects, all of those estimates, all those numbers, they're just fiction because one task will be too low. One task will be too high. You'll be over on some, under on others. Usually, if the estimator was fairly good, you'll be in the ballpark overall. But without those budget versus actual, just the bills will come by, you'll pay them, and you'll have no idea where you're at. You will kind of see the project progress, but you won't know how much you're paying versus what you were promised. And project timeline updates. So budget versus actual is kind of the cost component, the consumption component. Project timeline is your calendar and sequence of events updates there. No bad news. This is a problem that many customers have. They refuse to accept or hear bad news, and they make it an unpleasant event. And I would not recommend this personally if you want to work well with a partner and have a good working relationship. And it goes something like this. The partner looks into something and they say, turns out this feature doesn't work exactly as we expected. We tested the entire process workflow based on what we found. And it turns out that Business Central has this quirk where once you get to this step, it requires you to do this other thing, which doesn't quite fit exactly the way we wanted. And the customer says, that's unacceptable. You promised this. You better deliver. I don't care. That's your problem, right? They refuse to accept or acknowledge that there's a possibility that something won't go 100% perfectly. This process has 2 more steps than your old system did. Well, why didn't you know that? Why didn't you tell us? That's a core requirement. We can't have that. 2 more steps. That'll kill us. We do this 100 times a week. Okay, that doesn't really resolve the problem. The partner's not just like making this up for the fun of it. They want to inform the customer. They want to share this with you and work on a solution. But if the customer is always unpleasant when this bad news is delivered, the partner's not going to want to do it. And they're going to just work around it somehow, and you're going to get billed for it, and you won't have visibility as to what your real problems are. These report lines are sorted differently than what you now say you want. I'm not paying for that. That's your problem, right? And so it basically ends up in a situation where the partner is very reluctant to even have a conversation with the customer because all the customer does is complain and yell at them when they deliver something that isn't perfect for the customer, is not what they want to hear. And that's kind of like emperor has no clothes, all sorts of metaphors and analogies for that. So I would just say be open to the reality that not everything goes perfectly and partners are not omniscient. So you just need to accept that, be willing to work with them, say, okay, I understand this. How did we miss this? Let's figure this out. What are the options? If it's going to take four hours to fix this, can we share that cost? You bill us for 2, you eat 2 hours, whatever that is. I think there are some reasonable arrangements for that. Or the partner says, hey, this is a new requirement that you requested. That goes to a change request, which I'll get to later. The school bus. This is kind of a historical thing and not quite as relevant to the mid-market, but I'll just share it in preparation for the next point. So the school bus was an analogy or a metaphor that was shared with me when I worked for what was then the Big 6. Used to be the Big 8, then it went down to Big 6, then it went down to Big 4. And I speculate that vast majority of mid-market ERP implementations are far too demanding for this. The budgets just aren't large enough. The teams aren't large enough to have this occur. And the story is that the big consulting firm would roll up to the Fortune 500 company with a school bus, and they would then drop off all the 22-year-old college graduates who are now freshly minted management consultants. And so when someone said, yeah, here comes the school bus to me, I said, what is that? And he explained this story that Arthur Andersen would roll the school bus up in front of this massive company for this $50 million project. And a bunch of 22-year-olds go out there with their backpacks and pretend to be management consultants. And the customer is like not really realizing what's happening here. Again, I don't think this is a thing in the mid-market. There's just not enough budget. You just can't make this happen. However, the one potential lesson that you could take away from this as a mid-market ERP customer is that there is the possibility you may get undisclosed trainees or new hires on your project. And everyone needs to be trained. Everyone needs to start somewhere when they start with a partner. So it does happen, but should the partner disclose that to you up front? I don't know. Should they charge different rates? I don't know. If they're charging the same rate for a brand new hire who's brand new in ERP as a senior consultant who has 10 years of experience, probably not fully justified, right? So you can ask about how many years of experience for each of the resources on your project. So I think that's the lesson to take away there. We have a deep bench. This is a common tactic of ERP partners, management consulting firms, software development firms, any professional services firm. We have 50 experts with a combined 500 years experience. Look at us. Aren't we awesome? You should hire us, right? Secret. It doesn't matter. All of those claims don't mean a single thing. The only thing that matters is who they send to work on your project. You will not have all 50 of their experts working on your project. You may have 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever it is. Those are the only people that matter, not the 50 that are back at the office on different projects. Their expertise is irrelevant because all you're getting are the experts that are sent to your work on your project. So, which experts specifically will work on your project? And only the people on your project matter. Now, the one potential benefit of the deep bench and all the experts is that if someone isn't working out, or if someone doesn't know this area of the product or this third-party tool or whatever, you need to look out for that. They will claim to be able to do everything, and the partner often will not willingly swap someone out. But if you see that lack of skills or that skills gap or that technical deficiency, request a substitution. Hey, partner, you have all these experts. Why are you giving me someone who doesn't know Power BI to work on my Power BI reports? This person says they've never worked on fixed assets. Where's your supposed fixed asset expert, big partner, who has all the resources in the world, right? So in my experience, I worked for a big 6 consulting firm who claimed they had over 2,000 employees. We had maybe 1 substitution, 2 substitutions over my time there where someone else was brought into a project that wasn't on our specific local team. It is exceedingly rare, and it's usually only when there's a problem or when the customer demands it. And then another question is, should you ask that all application or functional consultants on your project have certification for MB800? I don't know. Does that matter? Does that make them any better or any worse? There are people with 20 years of experience who are very good consultants who may not have bothered to pass the exam for whatever reason. Then there are people who pass the exam, but they have less than 6 months of experience and really would be of little value to you. So, as always, does the exam or certification matter? I don't know. Something to consider, ask about it at least. And related to the whole deep bench thing, and we have so many skilled resources, bait and switch. Very common, unfortunately. So, team comes in, they do the sales pitch, you sign the engagement letter, some business analysts and functional consultants and maybe a technical person comes in, and they do all this analysis, these 4 people, and then the implementation starts and you never see those 4 people again. You now have 4 new people who are doing the implementation. Red flag. Something to ask for before you get to that point. Because if those 4 people who did all the analysis and requirements and scoping and design work roll off on another project, you may have a difficult time getting them back. So interview the consultants on the team. Beware of team substitutions and ask for it in advance. Say, look, if you're sending Joe and Sally and Bob and Tim on my project, and they're going to do all the upfront work, if they are competent, if we like them, if they work well, we expect them to carry on. We don't want them to disappear halfway through the project when the implementation starts. So something to be aware of that does happen. Also, ask about offshore staff. Some customers have strong feelings about this. I don't know that it's fully justified. There are some legitimate concerns around offshore development or implementation services, but it can be much more economical for everyone involved. It can be very effective. So on Monday afternoon, you deliver some requirements documents or you deliver a data package for data migration. And if you have a team in India who does the data migration, they can do that overnight. So you send off an email at 4 p.m., you come to work at 8 a.m., and the work is done. You have an email in your inbox and it says, hey, here are the results of the latest data migration test of the test plan. Here's the new release, whatever it is. That's the benefit of an offshore team with a 12-hour flip from your time zone. The downside to that is 8 a.m. comes around, you test something and you find a bug. Well, you got to wait until that email goes off at 4 p.m. The offshore team looks at it overnight and delivers you a new version at 8 a.m. the next morning. So pros and cons, right? If you expect things to be delivered throughout the day in your time zone pronto, and you want immediate iterations of, say, a customization, fixing bugs or making changes, well, in that case, onshore and nearshore is probably preferable. But for operations that are a little less time sensitive that can be done overnight, offshore can be a fantastic resource because things can happen overnight when they wouldn't be done onshore, nearshore. So there's pros and cons. Now, one admitted issue with a lot of offshore resources is they are not well managed. It's not the fault of the offshore or anything inherent problem in offshore. It's that the onshore, nearshore team managing the offshore resources just is not doing a good job. So if a partner has offshore staff, ask what the call schedule is, participate in some of those calls, make sure the offshore resources are actively managed and have the same standards of quality standards and delivery standards as any onshore team member. Okay. And I asked for some feedback on Twitter, and Ted brought this point up. So he said, ask to meet the consultants who will be assigned to your project up front. Not good to get presentation from folks with years of experience, only to be signed consultants with 3 months of experience down the road. Absolutely. So that's the bait and switch. It could be just different people, even though both sets are good. Switching, you lose a lot of knowledge, right? And then if you get the experienced consultants up front to be swapped out with the inexperienced, then, that's not good either. Okay. We specialize in. So some more feedback on Twitter. Kristen Hausman shared, when partners say they specialize in something, ask for a reference and follow up. So this is interesting. I don't think I've seen this or really paid attention to this. But I think her point is that partners will often say, yes, we specialize in the transportation and logistics and trucking industries. Customer, we're the perfect fit for you. Well, if a partner says something like that, where they claim they are the specialist who can specifically help you based on your requirements, your industry, your products you're working with, ask for a few referrals. It's an interesting request. And just realize the claims don't matter. Only the people on your product matter and your project matter. And if you ask for references, trust but verify, right? If they say they are transportation, logistics, trucking, and warehouse management expert, great. Can you send me, 3 customer referrals in our industry where you have implemented a similar solution? I don't want to hear about someone who does amusement parks or fast food stores or gas stations or, small manufacturing. I care about trucking, logistics, 3PL. Great. I'm sure you can provide that since you're a specialist in this area, right? Okay. Huge topic. It's its own entire, week-long conversation, but development practices. It is not uncommon in the Business Central world to have customizations or development occur of various forms. So, kind of hard for a inexperienced customer to assess the expertise and validate the skill set of a partner who makes claims that they do BC development. And often customers just don't know to think, to ask, to push on this, to just make sure that they're getting quality developers. And I would just start to ask things like, well, does the partner have formal development practices? And that could be an open-ended question, which is actually very difficult to answer. I've been trying to figure out how to discuss this topic separately. And you say, can you please provide me with your development standards? That's all you need to do. And if I suspect they will squirm, I would, because it's a difficult question to ask because I personally don't have that fully documented. I don't have a full methodology that I could deliver to the customer yet. I've learned that I now need to for various reasons. So, partner, please send me your formal development practices, guidelines, procedures, methodology, whatever you want to call it. Say, just deliver me your formal internal documentation. And they'll probably sit there and say, sure, we'll get back to you, right? Well, what you might be looking for is what type of customization requirements do you provide? What type of documentation? What are your standards for documenting requirements around customizations or development? What about your design documents? Can you show me a sample of a design document, what your guidelines are, your process is? How about a detailed test plan? And tell me about your source code repositories. Do you use DevOps, GitHub, something else? Do you use Azure Key Vault? Do you use Azure Key Vault HSM? How do you handle API secrets? Build pipelines. Tell me about your build pipelines and your build process. How often do you do builds? Do you do next minor, next major? What frequency do you do those automated builds? Can you share your automated test plan, design, and development methodology? And telemetry. What should I expect from App Insights related to the customizations you're developing for me? They should have an answer. Not difficult for anyone who is even semi-competent in Business Central development. Artifact management. How do you manage artifacts? Where can we have these stored and cataloged and archived? Show me a customization user guide that you've delivered. It can be redacted, but I want to see a sample of the customization user guide in addition to all the other documentation listed above. And a new certification exam is the MB820, the Business Central Developer Certification Exam. I believe it's going to go be available for beta in January. I've asked, but I am not aware of any study guides or materials or even an outline, training plan or study plan for it yet. So no information as of yet, but planning on beta in January is my current understanding. So you start to ask for that for any developers. And this is trickier with developers than verifying your application consultants oftentimes, because if the developer is remote, you want to talk with that developer. You want a name. You want to have multiple names. If that developer moves on, who's the backup? Oftentimes, developers are interchanged and swapped. So you want to know, you want to understand that developer's skill set, experience, background, whatever. Unfortunately, I've seen partners drop a developer onto a Business Central project. They have zero Business Central experience, but the partner claimed they did Business Central development. It happens. Or the partner won't have anyone on staff. They'll go hire a contractor who has a 10-year nav developer, but has never developed with BC Online in AL. Pretty huge gap there as well. So just as you interview a functional consultant, application consultant, business analyst, interview the developer, talk to them, at least get their information, their stats, their qualifications, their experience, right? Fun one, change orders. Partners love them, customers hate them. And I will just say this. If you get no change orders over the life of the entire ERP project, that is a huge warning sign, because that is impossible. There is no way you could have scoped, spec'd, documented, planned, designed, implemented, and done everything perfectly such that there was no change order that rose above the level of, 30 minutes, hour, whatever your threshold is for a change order. You need at least one change order, preferably a couple, to at least acknowledge that the partner is paying attention to a requirement change a requirement was unknown at the time of scoping, design, requirements analysis, whatever, you couldn't have possibly have found every single requirement and design and element of your implementation from day one. So expect some change orders. If you get none, it means those changes are getting buried in an undisclosed manner in some project line item, and you're paying for it one way or another. The change order just surfaces it as an explicit acknowledgement, allows everyone to talk about it rather than hide it, and allows you to say, hey team, let's get together. We have a feature gap here for whatever reason. Let's discuss it, understand how we missed it, understand what changed so that we can document it, vet it thoroughly, get it done right, and hand it over to the consultant or developer to implement properly. It surfaces it, brings it to light, and it allows everyone to participate. If you refuse to allow change requests on your project and you berate a partner for bringing change requests to you, you are just forcing them to hide all of that activity, and it's not to your benefit. So surfacing change requests is a good thing if done responsibly. Now, if every single week you get an 80-hour change request, and this happens 10 times during a 400-hour project, you have a serious problem, right? And it's not a problem at that point that the partner is causing, for instance. It happened long ago. It happened when you signed the contract. It happened when you agreed to the timeline and when you agreed to the budget. That's the problem with Waterfall. You signed a Waterfall engagement and it was 400 hours. Well, we now know that that's a mythical number. It's impossible. And now if you're resisting change requests and you're just trying to get your bargain by forcing that partner to agree to their 400-hour estimate, well, that was just mistakes all along the process. And at the end of the day, the problem is, even if you think you're being shrewd and getting a great deal, by forcing that partner to eat that, hundreds of hours in change requests because they agreed to a 400-hour proposal, you're not going to have a relationship at the end of that project. And that's not good for you. The partner's going to want to walk away, and you're going to be left with this mess that you're going to have to deal with to find a new partner. And I guarantee you're going to have hundreds of hours of cleanup because you tried to suppress the concept of change requests. That's my interpretation. If you have none, you have a serious problem. If you have dozens, that's a different type of problem. But by the time you see a lot of change requests, the problem is not now. The problem was weeks ago when you agreed to the project plan, the timeline, the scope, the budget, etc. And that goes back to your responsibility as a customer. You made mistakes. The partner did as well, but you made at least 50% of the mistake there. Okay. License fraud. This is an unfortunate one, but I am learning it does happen. And here's the layout. Project launch, September 4th. Everyone's gung-ho. Great. We have launched the project. We had our launch meeting, project team. Partner comes in and says, great, we're ready to order these 30 licenses the next day. And they want to place an order with the CSP for your Business Central, your CRM, your Office, or your, Power Platform, whatever it is. All 30 licenses. Here's the order. Please sign here. What's the problem with this? The problem is the go live isn't till January 2nd. So that means you, customer, are paying for 30 licenses, September, October, November, December, even though you're not going to have all 30 users online at best by January 2nd. This is what some might call an intentional ploy or a very sloppy move by a partner to try to get you to pay for 30 licenses for 4 months when you are not going to be using them. You are not going to have 30 users in the system during that implementation. Maybe you start with 2, then you add 2 more, then you add 5 more as different users come online for training or, design or whatever. Whatever your timeline is, you can buy licenses as needed. Most Microsoft licenses can be purchased individually by the user. And you can then only purchase them when you need them. Maybe there's a 1-day turnaround. That's fine. You can plan accordingly. Now, there may be some deal where Microsoft has a thing, buy 10 licenses and you get grandfathered under this lower renewal scheme, whatever. If that's your explicit choice, you've been made aware of these options, that's fine. Pile on those licenses, get the discount if that gets locked in for some period of time. Not a problem. Microsoft regularly does have license promotions like that, whether that's for migration, transitioning off a competing system, a seasonal thing, whatever. Go for it. But if the partner doesn't tell you why you should purchase all 30 licenses up front and just has you sign for thousands of dollars a year in licensing from day one, months before your go live, some might consider that to be license fraud. Not good. Even more sad, which does happen, is timesheet fraud. And this I would unequivocally call fraud. And this is when time is billed by someone, a consultant, developer, whatever, for instance, for a weekly meeting. But if you look closely at the sequence of events, you might see that someone billed you time, an hour, for the weekly meeting, even though that weekly meeting was canceled. You know, someone was sick, someone was on vacation, so you canceled this week, postponed next week. If you look carefully at the timesheet, wait a minute. Tim said he attended the weekly project meeting on October 2nd. We didn't have a call on October 2nd. It was a national holiday, whatever. Look for it. Hours billed for a task that doesn't yet have deliverables. It's a 40-hour task. 16 hours got billed. Okay. Hard to know. Hard to assess that. Hours billed for a task that should be completed or have a deliverable, but nothing was delivered. This is a little easier to catch. It happens. So, wait, you've billed 42 hours on this 40-hour task. I have no deliverables. What's going on here? Now, by that point, you're kind of farther along in the process. It's going to be an uncomfortable conversation, potentially. What's going on? Unfortunately, you as the customer have to be on top of this. Very, very unfortunate. It does exist. I'm aware of at least 3 cases of this happening, and it was really bad. It was just blatant. Just consultants stuffing their timesheet with hours. They didn't do a thing for the customer. Really, really sad. Unfortunately, I think the problem is that the partners do not thoroughly review the timesheets of their employees. And they trust their employee and they assume that it's all legitimate. Those consultants or developers have pressure to have certain utilization numbers, so they start stuffing hours into other projects. And if you look at their timesheets, you may find they have more than 50, 60 hours in a given week because they're billing multiple customers for time where they didn't actually do work for both. So it does happen. Very, very unfortunate, and it results in lawsuits. I speculate this happens on a larger project, a larger team, longer duration projects where it's easier to hide this stuff and go unnoticed. But you as a customer, unfortunately, will need to review every line on every timesheet. You'll need to make your assessment on what you think is legitimate. If you don't see any correlated progress in a task, if you don't have a deliverable that you can connect that time to, just ask, say, hey, partner, I see that Sally billed 4 hours for the financial reports. I don't see financial reports. I don't have a deliverable. I don't have a prototype. I don't have anything to test. I don't have a mock-up. What did I get for that 4 hours? And after asking that 5 or 10 times, the partner better get a clue that they have a problem internally and they need to better communicate, or the employee who's trying to pad their timesheets is doing something wrong and they need to have a talking to. So just be aware of that. It is unfortunate, but it does happen. And on that happy note, those are just a few rambling, over an hour, my apologies, of warning signs for ERP customers. Some things to look out for. And again, I am not used to trying to find these things from the customer perspective. I'm usually used to seeing them from the partner perspective. So There are probably lots of other angles to look at this from, a lot of other details to look for, but those are just a few things that I thought might be relevant for a customer who's going into an ERP implementation. You need to have your eyes wide open and just have realistic expectations around all of these things. It is not just a happy path where you sign the engagement letter and 3 months later, magically, you have a perfect ERP system. You'll need to put in the work, be responsible for it, manage the partner, and manage your project. Cheers. Hope you have a good one. Enjoy.